Hey, good morning, Mission students. My name is Josh. I'm our student pastor here at Mission. And normally, if you've tuned in previous weeks, we start out with a fun game, usually at the beginning. But this week, we just didn't feel like that a game felt right. In Romans 12, verse 15, it says that we as followers of Jesus, we rejoice with those who rejoice, and we mourn with those who mourn. And it's pretty clear if you've looked at the news at all this week, if you've been on social media or really been talking to friends. Right now, we are a nation, we're a country, we're mourning right now. That what we've seen over the course of the last 10 days is stories continually starting to come to light of hurt and pain and brokenness and systems of inequality and injustice that exist right here in our country. That for many of our friends, that they are very aware of and have lived every single day in light of. But for others of us, that we're increasingly becoming aware right now in this season. All right, before we jump in to this morning, one of the things that's been really helpful for me, and I would encourage you to do the same, is doing four things right now, four things. Listen, learn, assess, and act. And I think that these really go in order, that we need to be intentionally listening to people who've had different experiences than us, whose color of their skin is different than ours, listening, learning. There's a lot of information that you can get out there, and I would love to recommend even some resources for you to actually learn more of what's happened and how we've got to this point. It didn't happen by accident, and there's a lot of information, different books and documentaries that you can watch to educate yourself. Listen, learn, assess. Assess. Look inward and ask, how have I contributed to this? Whether it's through silence, whether it's through inappropriate jokes or hurt words or just ignorance. Assess yourself, and then fourth and finally, act. If you missed it earlier this week on Thursday and Friday, I had the opportunity to sit down with one of our students, former students, Jaden, and hear a little bit of his story. If you missed that, I would encourage you to go back and you can watch Thursday and Friday's resource around that. And he has some great things to share in there. That we collectively as mission students are also planning some things that we're going to be able to do to continue this conversation, because we don't want this just to be a flashpoint in time where we have a bunch of trendy hashtags and then we go back to our regularly scheduled lives. And so I'm excited over the course of the next few months for us to intentionally keep this topic in front of us and orient ourselves around further conversation, dialogue in community. One of the things that we are going to be doing even this week is a prayer gathering. Now, this is going to happen with other churches that we're partnering with in the 10 to come together this Tuesday, June 9th at 9 a.m. And we're going to gather together collectively to pray for 30 minutes. And I would invite you as students to come, to bring your parents, to be a part of that experience as we go before God and ask Him to move, ask for Him to work. Something that we're going to do actually right now. Would you join me in prayer? God, we confess our sin. We confess the brokenness that exists in our world. We confess our part in that, whether it's been through silence, it's been through ignorance or unawareness, or issues that we have ignored. And God, we ask that you would, by your Spirit, convict and bring awareness. Would you even help us assess in our own lives, perhaps the ways that we have fallen short, perhaps the ways that we have contributed to these areas of injustice. And God, would you give us the courage to speak up? God, would you give us the wisdom to listen, to be silent and hear, to quiet ourselves and intentionally learn? And would you give us discernment on the ways that we can act so that what has been will no longer be? And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hey, middle school and high school students, we are so excited that you are tuning in with us this morning. I hope you're having an awesome weekend. It has been so fun to get to go out and do things again and everything being just a little bit more normal. Why don't you guys comment in the chat and let me know, what have you guys been doing this week? What are you excited to do now that we can start going out, seeing a few more people? I don't know about you guys, but I have been itching to see some students again. And we are so excited because we have some things planned for June and July that we are actually going to get to see each other in person. So middle schoolers, I'm gonna talk to you guys first. We have been doing online small groups and it's been so fun, and we are going to continue to do those in June and July 3 times a month. Well, what are we gonna do on that other one time? Well, we are going to meet in person for small group, okay? It's gonna be super cool. We are going to meet at 82 Stratford Drive in June. It's gonna be on Tuesday, June 23rd, from 6:30 to 7:30. And we are going to meet in the parking lot at Mission, and we're gonna have tents set up for each individual small group, and they're gonna be 30 feet apart from each other so that we can keep everyone safe and healthy, but also get to hang out in person because we miss seeing you guys so much. So 3 times a month, we'll be online just as normal right after our 10 a.m. message. And then 1 time a month, we are going to meet at 82 Stratford Drive for in-person small groups. All you have to do is register at the link that I'm gonna comment in the comments right now so that we know that you're coming, because we wanna be able to set up enough chairs, enough tents, so that we can make sure that we are totally ready for an awesome night to hang out with you guys. Now, high school, we've got some exciting things happening for you guys too. You guys have been tuning in at 10 a.m. with us and going to small groups later on Sunday nights, and we're gonna change it up and we're doing high school in-person watch parties. The only thing that's a little bit different is that instead of every week, it's going to be every other week. So twice a month in June and July, you guys will be gathering with your small group in person to watch this message and to do small group. Your leaders are working hard to organize these at someone's house so that you guys can hang out in a backyard, on a driveway, and watch church together and do small group. So they will be following up with you. These are gonna be on June 14th and June 28th, and then also on July 12th and 26th. So be sure to be in contact with your small group leader. They will make sure that you know the date, the time, and the address so that you can do a watch party with your friends. We are so excited to get to see you guys again. And middle schoolers, your parents will be getting more information and they'll be able to register you. And high schoolers, your leaders will be reaching out with all of those details. But right now, I'm going to kick it over to Josh for James 4, and he is going to tell us how we can win within.
Hey, thanks, Alex. We're jumping into James 4 here, but as we do, I want you to think about, have you ever had a moment where you realized that you didn't know something, but you pretended that you did just so that you could maybe fit in or feel like that your friends accepted you, or that you were liked, or that you weren't an outsider? Like, I'll give you a couple examples. Maybe it was someone told a joke and you didn't get it. But rather than being like, I don't get it, and that feeling like it's embarrassing, you just went, that's funny. Even though in your mind you're like, I have no clue what they're talking about. You ever have a moment like that? You can comment if you had. How about this? Maybe that there was a song that was playing, and it became very clear that all of your friends knew this song. They're singing along to it. They know all the words. You've never heard it before. You're completely lost. But then you do that thing where you're like nodding your head and you're smiling and you're trying to like make up the words as it's coming along because you're trying to fit in. You ever have that moment? Again, you can comment. I do this all of the time. It mostly has to do with the music that my wife likes, which is not typically the music that I listen to. But every once in a while, I don't want her to think that I'm quite as lame as what I sometimes am as it relates to cultural awareness around those things. And so I'll just be like smiling and nodding, and I'm completely lost, right? How about this? Maybe it was your friends were talking about a movie or a television show, or maybe just like a video game that they're really into. You have no experience, but rather than you saying, I'm not sure what you guys are talking about, or what is that? You know, I've never heard of Stranger Things, or what is Outer Banks? You go, oh yeah, that's amazing, or so cool, yeah, great stuff. Even though you're lost. You ever have a moment like that? Again, this is a safe place. You can comment, you can let us all know. No one's here to judge you. For me, I remember this happening when early on when I was starting to drive. Now, for those of you who are in high school, maybe you've got some experience with this. Give a shout out if you currently are driving. Maybe you have your learner's permit, or you're in the early stages of learning to drive, or you've been driving for the last year or two. You can give some shout outs. For those of you who are in middle school, you maybe have less experience with driving, but I think you can follow along with what I'm about to say. When I first started driving, I was in driver's ed, and the vehicle that I learned to drive on was an automatic transmission. Now, for those of you who don't know, there's basically two types of cars. There's an automatic transition, which you just put the car in drive, and it has two pedals. It has a brake, and it has like an accelerator, like the gas pedal. And then there's what's called a manual transmission, or you might have heard it called a stick shift. That kind of car has three pedals: a clutch, a brake, and the accelerator, the gas pedal. So when I first started to drive, I'd only ever really had experience driving an automatic transmission. Like just, you put it in drive, two pedals, you go. But over summer break, my family went on a trip to visit my aunt and uncle and cousins in North Carolina. And we had a great trip, and we spent a lot of time with them, and I was really proud that I was new into driving, and of course I was talking about that quite a bit. And towards the end of the week, my Uncle Paul, he said, hey, we got to run to the grocery store. And he said, hey, Josh, I know you've been driving lately. Why don't you come with me, and I'll let you drive my car, and I'll sit in the passenger seat, and I'll give you some experience. And of course, like, I got really excited about that. I'm like, oh yeah, like I've been driving, I'm feeling really cool. And so we go out to his car, and we start to get in, and we open up the door, and I realize, I look, and the car is a manual transmission. A stick shift, right? Three pedals instead of two. You don't just put the car in drive, you have to shift gears along the way. Now, in that moment, what I should have done, now that I'm older, I'm a little bit wiser, maybe not quite as dumb, I would say, I don't know. I don't know what to do. Now, I can drive a manual transmission now, but at the time, I was completely lost. But rather than face my embarrassment and admit that I didn't know what I was doing, I looked at it and thought, I can figure this out. Just so you know, that's not something that you just figure out. You got to learn, right? But I was like, oh no, I can figure this out. So I get in the driver's seat, and I'm looking down there, I'm realizing there's an extra pedal, and in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what these different pedals do. In a regular car, the brake is the one that's the farthest on the left. So you've got like the brake, and then you've got like the accelerator on a regular car, right? On a manual transmission, brake is in the middle and the clutch is over here. And so I'm used to, as I've been trained in driver's ed, that you put your foot on the brake when you start the car. And so as my Uncle Paul is getting in the vehicle, he's got the door open, he's got like one foot in the car, I go and I put my foot on what I think is the brake. It's not, it's the clutch. For those of you who know anything about driving a stick shift, what happens is as soon as you depress the clutch, the car goes into neutral. And if the car's sitting on a slope like this car was, you immediately start to roll backwards. And that's what happens. I put my right foot on the farthest pedal to the left, which is the clutch, not the brake. I push it down as far as I can, and the car starts rolling backwards. So my Uncle Paul is half in the car, half out of the car, and he begins to immediately just be like, Josh, 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 Josh. And he's talking real loud. He's like, hit the brake, hit the brake, hit the brake. Now, in that moment of panic, in my mind, my foot is already on the brake, and it's pressed as far down as it can. So I'm trying to push it down farther, and as it's happening, the car is rolling back faster and faster and faster out of their driveway, while my Uncle Paul is chasing frantically behind as the car is about to roll right out into the street. Fortunately, he managed to lean in, grab the emergency brake, pull it, the car slams to a stop, and I'm sitting there embarrassed. And he asked the question, he's like, do you know how to drive a manual transmission? Do you know how to drive a stick? And at the moment, it was this like, no, I don't. I have no clue what I'm doing. And if we're honest, we've all probably had these moments like that, where we did something that we look back and we're like, why did I do that? Why didn't I just say, I don't know? And I have a hunch, at least for me, and maybe it's true for you, on why we don't say, I don't know. I think it's about what I'll call the war within. You see, every single one of us, we have this war inside of us, and it really comes from a place of wanting to look like we have things figured out. It comes from a place of wanting to look like we know what we're doing. It comes from a place that says to say that you don't know is to admit weakness, or to not know means that you are an outsider, and to be an outsider means that perhaps that you're going to feel less valuable, or you're going to feel less loved. You're going to feel isolated rather than in community. And so what we do oftentimes is we think, well, I'll just fake it till I make it. And sometimes that works. But if we're honest, most of the time it doesn't. And you see, this is what James is talking about as we jump into the 4th chapter of this short letter, as he's going to talk about this war within. He puts it this way. It's in James chapter 4, starting in verse 1. He says this. He says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? He's like, why do you not get along? Now, if we were asked that question, we might answer with things like, oh, the reason we don't get along is because my sister's kind of annoying, or that kid at my school is kind of a jerk, or we just don't see eye to eye on the same sports teams, or we just have different personalities. We might say, oh, it's because they ask too much of me. We might begin with answering the questions, what causes fights and quarrels among you, by starting with the other person and listing off things related to them. But James turns it around on us. He says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? See, what James is saying is that conflict doesn't start out there, it starts in here. That inside each and every one of us, there is a war within. There's conflict inside of us. And the conflict is between faking, pretending, projecting, or admitting we don't know. Admitting that we don't have it figured out. Admitting that maybe, just maybe, there's some things that we have to learn. Maybe we need some help. He continues in verse 6. He says, but he, talking about God, gives us more grace. And I love grace. I love when I make a mistake, and you can ask my wife, Sarah, it happens with frequency around our home. And I love when I make a mistake, and she says, hey, it's okay. I forgive you. I'll give you some grace. So if I say I'm going to do something and I forget to do it, and she says, hey, I'll give you some grace, like I know you've been busy. Or, hey, I know, it's okay, right? It feels good to be on the receiving end of grace. And fortunately, we have a God who gives grace. But James doesn't just stop there. He doesn't just say God gives us grace. He continues. He says that's why the Bible, the scripture says, God, and this is powerful, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Now, this verse might seem shocking to you because there's 4 words that most of the time, if we've grown up around church or you've heard much about Jesus, you're probably surprised to hear that there's a verse in the Bible that says God opposes anyone or anything. Because we kind of think like, oh man, God loves everyone. It's kind of like his job, right? God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And I don't know about you, but those are 4 words that I personally find uncomfortable because if I'm honest, there's a lot of my life that looks like me being proud, right? That when I don't ask for help, I'm being proud. If I'm honest, when I lie or mislead to try to look like that I know things that I don't, or that I've got things figured out in a way that I really don't, it's based on me being proud. When I avoid conflict or confrontation because I don't want someone to think badly of me or change their perception of me, that's birthed from me being proud. When I fail and fall short, the source of that, at its core, when I don't ask for forgiveness, but try to fix it or cover it up, that's me being proud. This is the war within. Proud versus humble. Now, this is the path that he lays out before us. The war within is, will we listen to the voice that leads us towards being proud, or will we listen to the voice that leads us towards humility? And I think one of the ways that you can differentiate between those two things is simply around this idea of help. You see, the proud person says, I don't need help, I can figure it out on my own. And the humble person says, I don't know the answer. I could use some help. So how do we move forward? In James 4:10, he says this, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. I think James is saying similarly to what the great poet and philosopher Kendrick Lamar said when he said, be humble. Or as Pastor Rick Warren once said, that humility is not thinking less about yourself, it's just thinking about yourself less. See, the trick to winning the war within is shifting where our eyes are focused. And I think two things that we can do that will shift our eyes' focus from being on ourselves to being on others is serve first and seek last. Serve first, seek last. Here's what I mean by that. One of the most important things that we can do to reorient our eyes from being on ourselves and focusing on others is looking for opportunities to serve. And one of the best ways to do that is asking the question, how can I help? How can I help you? What if this week you made it a priority to ask 3 people every single day in your life? And I know this is going to sound crazy, but what if every single day this week you looked for 3 people in your life to ask the question, how can I help you? Mom, on this Monday, how can I help you? And she might say, I could really help if you would do some dishes, or it would really be helpful if you would clean up your room. Ask that question, how can I help you? And then do something about it. Maybe ask a younger brother, younger sister, how can I help you? They may say, I need help with my homework. Or mom asked me to put away the laundry. I could use some help with that. And instead of saying, well, that's not my chore and she asked you to do it, you can say, okay, I'd love to help you. And maybe you've got a friend or there's a fellow student that you could reach out to and say, how can I help you? Serve first. When we serve first, we choose the path of humility and we shift our eyes from on ourselves to on others. Serve first. The second is seek last. Seek last. What I mean by that is we are naturally trained to strive for first. Strive for first. Like in whatever we do, we want to work at it. And this is like a value in our culture to work hard and be the best. First place. In fact, I think of Ricky Bobby when he said, if you're not first, you're last, right? And this is like the silly part that we don't always stop and think about. And if we don't, we'll find ourselves constantly pushing ourselves to be first, often at the expense of others. What if you followed in the path of Jesus, who one time in Luke 13:30 said, those who are last are the ones who will be first? What if you looked for more ways for you to be last rather than striving for first? Let me give you some examples of this. Maybe as your family is preparing for dinner, instead of rushing to be the first to get food, what if you intentionally said, I'm going to eat last. I'm going to make sure everybody else gets theirs before I get mine. What if when it came to planning for the weekend, instead of you telling your family, this is what I want to do and when I want to do it, you said, what do you want to do this weekend? And then rather than hoping that they pick what you want, you go along with that. You make yourself last. Serve first, seek last. Now, there's a war that's going on within every single one of us. It's the war to strive to be first, to pretend like we have it all together. It's the lie that we believe that to say I don't know means that somehow I lack value. What if we turned that on its head? What if we stopped and paused? We looked for others around us and asked the question with intentionality, how can I help you? And look for ways that we could actively choose to be last rather than striving for first. And we're going to head to small groups in a little bit to talk about this more. And I would love for you as you do to think about this question. What is the obstacle or barrier that most frequently gets in my way of choosing to ask for help or offering to help? What's the obstacle or barrier that most frequently gets in my way of either asking for help from others or offering to help others around me? Let me pray. God, thank you. Thank you that you modeled first and foremost for us what it looks like to serve first and seek last. That you, as the creator of the universe, had every right for all of us to serve you and for you to be first, and yet you took a posture that was completely opposite to that. And God, as we follow after you, may we walk in your footsteps. May we be self-reflective and realize the parts of us that are operating out of self-reliance, out of a need to prove ourselves rather than to admit when we fall short or do not know. And God, would you show us this week daily 3 people who we could actively look to help, to invest our time in, to serve, rather than looking for others to serve us. Lord, would you help us win the war within? And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
If you guys are looking for ways that you can help other people, I have a list of chores of things that I need done in my house. So if you want to reach out to me, I would be happy to help you guys help me. But in all seriousness, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're new and you've never experienced Mission Students before, first of all, hi, thank you so much for tuning in today. We would love to get to know you. There's a form over in the chat that if you fill out, we're gonna send you a $5 Starbucks gift card. So it's kind of cool. So only for new students. Fill that form out, let us get to know you. We would love to connect you with a small group. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. If your parents weren't able to tune in with us today, make sure they open up their email this coming Thursday. It will have all of the information they need about small groups and in-person watch parties, and that way you guys can experience those with us these coming months. And if you are able to join us this coming Tuesday for the prayer gathering, we would love to see you there. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. We'll see you later.